Cody Bellinger certainly would have as you indicated. I'm just going to let you take it away. Cody Bellinger certainly has some appeal to the Cardinals. Could be a fit for sure. He did improve last season, so there's some reasons for optimism. But as you pointed out in your chat, it was such good information and good insight. The Cardinals may not be crazy with a one-year deal. And see, I thought that they would like a one-year deal. You made a case why they wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in some ways a one-year deal with a guy like that fits their business model, right? They just have traded for guys like that. Here would be a chance to sign a guy like that. It is somewhat reminiscent of, say, what the Greg Holland situation was, though we're not anywhere near spring training. But, that kind of deal where it was a pillow deal and a chance for a guy who fit the Cardinals' need to come in and reclaim his kind of value and then possibly leave. A team that gives Bellinger a chance to rebuild his value is going to want something in return for that year. The Cardinals in the past have said that they think they can win a guy over, right? Now, it's a big risk because Bellinger has Boris. So say he comes in, has a great year, and then he can go strike riches elsewhere. It's not exactly ideal for the Cardinals because it would just be delaying the need by a year. But in a way, delaying the need by a year is still filling the need for a year. And it fits into the notion that maybe they can woo him. It has worked here recently. Let's keep that in mind. I mean, they did successfully do that with Goldschmidt before he played a game in St. Louis, and they have now done it really against the odds. Locally, we kind of knew what direction things were going with Nolan Arenado, but still when he made his choice, it seemed to surprise a lot of folks nationally that he would come off a top 3 MVP year and not rush back into free agency to cash in and instead choose to commit to St. Louis. Again, he had been very candid with all of us locally, any of the reporters who asked, about what he was thinking, about how he was feeling, about when he wanted to make his decision. And you could kind of see particularly that day when they won the division, you could see how much it meant to him, and you could see how genuine he was, that it meant something to him as a Cardinal. But, the fact that he made his choice seemed to surprise people nationally. So it has been successful recently. I'm not sure that Bellinger rises to the level of the guys that the Cardinals have traded for and tried to woo here just because he's such a bounce-back candidate. I'm just saying that it has to intrigue a little bit because the risk is minimal, too, if it just doesn't work out. It's just cash.
Right. No, listen, I think on one hand there's a huge risk factor, especially if they insist on carrying Paul DeJong again this year, and Bellinger's 2-year block of statistics is
it's the same.
Awful, really awful. Yeah. That's like 2 bottom 10 OPS guys over a 2-year period they would have. But when I was doing one of my deep dives into this, though, I couldn't help but notice that Bellinger's stats, although they weren't good per se, but they were significantly better than they were in 2021, which would indicate he's moving in the right direction and that his agent, Scott Boras, is likely telling the truth when he says this is about rebuilding and restoring the strength in that right shoulder. That's what all this is about. And he believes, obviously, Bellinger is getting a lot closer to accomplishing that. So in that regard, it could be a great buy, although none of us know exactly what a 1-year deal would cost for him, because there is considerable interest. There appears to be anyway. Now let me ask you this: You mentioned I'll let you do the mentioning, but in your chat you mentioned some of the Cardinal connections, other than the fact that one that I think we've all talked about, Turner Ward being the batting coach of the Dodgers in Bellinger's first 2 seasons, 2017-18, when he was really good, and then he won the MVP, right? MVP in 2019. But anyway, what are some of the other connections?
The ones that I mentioned are obviously a shared agent with Matt Holliday, the Cardinals' new bench coach, and then a teammate of David Freese. Freese and Bellinger, worked together. Remember that time that Freese had with the Dodgers, right there at the end of his career. That was Bellinger beginning to kind of search. Still had some really big moments for them, but he was part of that. And then, of course, he had the time spent with Pujols. It's basically like connections. I mean, the one that stands out is the agent one to me, because you think about just through the years of talking with Scott and the Boris Corp group, and we're kind of seeing it this year. I mean, they do find ways. They have ways to give players support beyond the team, right? Like they're an incorporated business essentially. I mean, like, they have facilities, they have doctors they trust, they have training things. They work with players to seek out, like, all right, this is an area you want to improve. Here are the best people to work with. They're doing that some with Tyler O'Neill this year in cooperation and concert with the Cardinals. Obviously Matt Holliday is a well-regarded, highly respected player who has been represented by Boris. His son is represented by Boris, the first overall pick this past year. So I think, there's a connection there with Bellinger. And Holliday's got a bit of a reputation coming from Matt Carpenter and Nolan Arenado for the work that he does with hitters. So it's just, I'm not trying to draw a strong line there, but I'm just pointing out that, like, if Bellinger has questions about what kind of opportunity or what kind of culture he'd find here that would be different than the Dodgers, people he's been close to or has a close connection to, they're only a phone call away.
Derrick Goold with us, the great baseball writer from the Post-Dispatch STL Today. Follow him on Twitter at @dgould. In your chat, and I don't want to like misquote you or misinterpret you, so I apologize if I do. I'm not doing it intentionally.
No, sorry.
But
if
it
I
seems
wrote
like
bad, let me know.
No. But it seems like based on some of your comments that your reporting indicates you think the Cardinals and Christian Vasquez are a really good fit, a mutually interested type of fit for him to join the Cardinals as a free agent catcher. Is that accurate? Or if not, correct me. Yeah. I don't take exception.
That's
Yep.
I mean, they see the mutual connections. They see the mutual appeal. They met. Christian Vasquez wasn't there, but his agent met with Mo and the front office group. I know he met with Mo. I'm not sure how many of the members of the front office group were there. They're in Las Vegas, and they've been in touch. The Cardinals have, the list of catchers available is not like secret, right? It's pretty public, and you can go through and say, okay, here's where they line up, here's where they don't. They line up with Murphy, obviously out there in Oakland. They line up with Jansen up there in Toronto. I know that other catchers up there in Toronto may get some buzz, but no, it's really more of a Jansen fit if that's what they want to go. And then there's the free agents. Vasquez, Narvaez, and Zunino are three guys who stand out, sort of on the Cardinals list there. And you can see the obvious traits and connections between Christian Vasquez and what he wants and what the Cardinals are talking about. And of course, it goes without saying that Contreras, I should say, Wilson Contreras, obviously the offensive force as a catcher. But Vasquez, he's at an age where what kind of length of contract is he going to look for? Is it 3 years? Does that overlap with Ivan Herrera coming up and splitting time, then taking over time? Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? If Herrera's as good as some in the Cardinals organization believe he can be, believe he will be, then you want somebody who's going to be there when he arrives and share the position, and then be there when he arrives and continue to share the position, because the days of Yadier Molina type workload are just over.
Right.
They just aren't happening. So we have to recalibrate what's expected from that everyday catcher. And, a guy like Vasquez, and maybe to a certain extent some of these other guys, certainly Contreras is going to sign for a longer-term deal than he'll be a full-time catcher. But the window of Vasquez, the connection with Molina, represented by the same agent, defense first, contact-oriented guy, it doesn't take, at his age, his reputation for handling pitchers, his postseason experience, how much you want to put weight on that. Even in this most recent World Series, he's got 2 rings. He's going to play for Molina in the World Baseball Classic. So again, I mean, you can go through and just find all these similarities. Even like at one point in time, his nickname was Mini Yachty. If you want to put much stock in that, I mean, there's just a lot there.
No,
you go, okay,
you're right.
Look, if the price point is right, the years are going to be right, and just kind of the whole reputation he has sure feels like a Cardinals kind of fit, unless they want to go in a radically different direction than they have for how many years? Bernie, we were asking this. You would know. It was the last offense first catcher Ted Simmons?
Wow, that is a great question. I hadn't thought about that either. Because I don't believe would Eli Marrero count? I mean,
don't know. That's a great question.
He would be fringy, I think. Let me see here real quick. He had some years with the Cardinals. No, not much. No, I thought my memories are failing me. I thought he was better offensively than he was. So, no. It could have been Todd Zeile, but they moved him away from catching.
There you go.
Right? Who else?
What kind of a culture shock would that be?
It would be a big-time culture shock, right?
Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. It could be a good thing. But
right.
It's got to be part of it's a thing.
Yeah, it's really, really kind of interesting. And I can't know off the top of my head, I can't think that I don't think anyone else really qualifies unless you would consider what about let me look at this of course. Darryl Porter was above average, but I don't know that he was but I don't know that he was a offense first catcher. And his offense was fine as a Cardinal, but, if you go by OPS plus, I mean, this is his Cardinal years. 117, 109, 119, then slightly below average, and then an 85, 108. So that's a really good run, actually. 13% above, as a Cardinal, like 9-10% above league average in OPS plus during his time. So that's a guy. I don't think Tony Pena – I think their hope was that Tony Pena would be that guy, but I don't think that worked out the way they wanted. And real quick, and I'm sorry to bog this down, but it's so easy to find these things. If you look at his 3-year OPS plus with the Cardinals, it was 79. It's 21% below average. So scratch him off the list. His reputation, I think, is that he would deliver offense, but it never really happened. He did in Pittsburgh, but even then it was a little exaggerated. So, yeah, I think that an offense first catcher would be fine, but
yeah,
I understand the appeal of Vasquez. I think he brings a lot to the proceedings, especially if it would mean the Cardinals could actually reallocate their some of their other money into finding a number 5 hitter or left-handed bat, which you've written about many times already this offseason. And I wanted to actually, this is a good way to segue. You put a lot of time and effort into getting to the bottom of the Cardinals payroll and how much they have theoretically available. And rather than just sort of like going to Cots contracts or Spot Rec or whatever and just using their stuff, you kind of went into the nitty-gritty and got a more detailed look at it. And I really appreciated the time you put into that because it's really hard to kind of figure that out. It's not that simple. So you did a lot of homework. So here we go again because I don't want to misquote your work, but when I was reading it, my opinion or my takeaway was that maybe they'll have between $15 and $20 million to spend this offseason, but that doesn't take into account some other things. But rather than me babble about this, why don't you explain it? How much have you determined roughly that they have available to spend based on what they want to spend?
So in that story, what I did was I took a 24-man roster, feeling that they need to add a catcher and they want to add a bat, right? So 13-man pitching staff. I had already baked in the fact that they would non-tender Alex Reyes. I had included Chris Stratton. He signed for slightly less than some of the estimates that were out there, but I got pretty close to that.
Right.
And you get them to an opening day payroll, and it gets tricky. I understand that, but let's talk about opening day payroll. Opening day payroll right now is about 163 million committed, and that includes the slight, rebate that they get from some of the deferments that are out there, which are Arenado and Wainwright most notably, right? It's not as big as the entire deferment, but it is somewhat of a rebate because of the present day value of the contract, okay?
Yep.
So that is all baked in there. Now, where do the Cardinals want to get? Because Mozeliak has said, and he was given multiple opportunities to define this, and everybody has probably listened to his and my exchange at the press conference about this. He said payroll's going up. To his point, he said, I don't know how else to say that. Payroll is, what they want. What he means by that is they want to get back kind of on that upward swing that they had budgeted before 2020, and the reduction of ticket sales and reduction of attendance and all that stuff that then did happen in 2020 and 2021. They want to get back up to that level that they had originally planned and kind of map. And it is the same curve, if you want to follow like the same curve, as their rise in rights fees that they're getting from their $1 billion deal with Bally's. So, those things are kind of the target. And if you follow the trend before 2020, so this is what they expected to pay opening day 2020, and the rise in spending over the next few years had the season's been normal, they would get to between 180 and 185 million, which is about where they're targeting now. They can spend more than that. They can spend less than that, but that would put them back on the curve of spending that they would. So if you knowing that these aren't like rigid guardrails, you're talking about having a $20 million gap there already. And when Mozeliak says payroll is going up, and he's talking about opening day payroll, they would then see a leap from about 154, 155 to, if they get there, 180, 185.
And
that's opening day payroll. Let me stress that again. Opening day payroll, 26-man roster. That is different than the final number that comes at the end of a season, which is 40-man payroll, which could get well above where they start the season.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because they would be able to improve their team with that kind of spending, but
yeah,
maybe the way to put this is that people may have to adjust their expectations a little bit. And by the way, by me saying that, I'm not sitting here saying, well, that's plenty of money. They don't need to spend more than that. I'm not saying that at all. But I just think this is a time to kind of reflect on this and understand it, and then maybe adjust your expectations. And anyone listening to this can still very much so complain about where they wind up, depending on where they wind up. But
yeah.
I think the hopes were up that there would be a rather large increase. And I don't know how to categorize this increase because it's not small. This potential increase, it's not small, but I don't know that they'll get the upgrades that they need to get. I'm just not sure. We'll have to wait and see. There's no need to speculate, really. They have to just see what they do.
It's 30. I mean, it has the potential to be 30 million in an increase. And where does that go? Some of that goes to Arenado, and his contracts. But there's still room there, and they see that. If we oversimplify this, and a big part of this is other places, and I think there was a lot of confusion about the money with Arenado's deal. There's just confusion everywhere.
Right.
But the money that is coming to the Cardinals in 2023 is money already owed Arenado from 2021. That's the best way that I can describe it. It's already money he's earned, and this is money that he negotiated to be deferred by the Rockies and paid in 2023 to make the trade possible. Arenado and his representative had to negotiate on two sides just to make the deal possible, and that was with the Rockies, and that was with the Cardinals. And so there are scheduled payments with both of those teams. But this money that has been kind of portrayed as money coming back to the Cardinals in 2023, it's not. It's money owed Arenado from 2021 when he did not draw a salary from the Cardinals. Eventually, Rockies will have paid all of his salary for that season, which, again, fits into the scale back of spending that the Cardinals had planned coming out of the shortened season. That was important to them to make that deal.
You did a hell of a job with that, and I know it wasn't easy. You probably had to drink extra coffee, maybe even take some kind of headache medication. But thanks for doing it. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, of course.
One more thing for you, and we kept you a long time, but this has been great. We've covered a lot of ground. So I did want to get your handicapping, if that's the word, of Scott Rowland's chances of making that climb from last year's voting percentage of 63.2% to the necessary 75%, as in being named on 75% of the ballots. The other two returning candidates that went over the 50% threshold last year were Todd Helton at 52% in his fourth year, Billy Wagner 51% in his seventh year. So they figured a climb. But do you think how do you handicap Rowland's chances of getting to the magic number, which is 75%?
If not this year, then next year.
That seems right.
He either takes the leap all the way in this year, or he takes the leap to the doorstep this year, and they escort him across next year.
Right.
The one real interesting one that I'm intrigued by is Jeff Kent. Now that there has been the traffic has alleviated from the ballot, Bernie.
Right.
And it's his last year on the ballot. I wonder if he's going to see a significant surge of voting. Last time on, McGriff got some of that. These other guys, you just think about like Jeff Kent's career and how long he's been on the ballot with the same guy he shared a lineup with how he dealt with just like the heart of the ballot crunch that was on there. And now he's free of that. I wonder how voters will view that and give him a last year bump. But I think Rowland is on the brink of immortality, if there is such a thing. It either happens this year or a year from now.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. And I'm thinking that there's probably little reason for Carlos Beltran to be too excited his first year on the ballot. I don't know where that will go eventually, but that I hate to use the word punished, but I can't think of a better one. He will be sanctioned or something by a pretty good percentage of the voters. That's what I would expect anyway, because of 2017 and the scandal that came out of there, his role in it in Houston. And I understand that, but I wonder if are we talking a long-term detention, or it's we have to teach you a lesson detention? I don't know. I don't know what to expect down the road. That's going to be a tough one.
I'm worried. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Well, Derrick, thanks for everything, man, and happy Thanksgiving to you and Erica and Ian and your parents and Erica's family and everybody else. So that'll be great.
Thanks. Same to you, Bernie, and all the listeners out there. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right. You take care, my friend. That's my good friend, Derrick Goold. Love that man and appreciate all his hard work. And I know he'll have a great Thanksgiving. We got to take a break, and it is interesting because the payroll flexibility, again, Derrick, rather than guessing at it, he really did the painstakingly complex homework on it, but somewhere between 20 and 30 million. And I don't know really how to reset my expectations, because if it's closer to 30 million, you can do a lot with 30 million. I don't need them to like pour that all into one player, but I do think they need to reach for a higher shelf, so to speak. So we'll see what they do. This is going to be a very interesting offseason, because I think the Cardinals can go in so many directions. They could surprise us with an aggressive move. I'm anticipating that they'll settle for a good, sensible move that will make an impact, but not huge impact. Well, I don't know, and I could be wrong about all this. What concerns me is Mo has been on this thing where he is making it clear, we're not changing. No, we're not changing the way we do business. We've been very successful. And that's the thing that bothers me. I mentioned this yesterday on the show. Let's be really pragmatic about this. The Milwaukee Brewers are now disengaging. They're not totally going into the tank mode, but they're disengaging. And they're transitioning a little bit. And there's a lot of talk in Milwaukee. They're going to trade Corbin Burns because they can afford maybe a Woodruff extension, but not a Burns extension. And there's going to be some of those things that just will lead to the perception that the Brewers aren't fully engaged in competing. And they had already cut payroll last year. So I'm not sure what to make of the Brewers, but I don't see even – they got a couple good prospects. I don't see them, at least right now, it could change, as being better than they were last year. And we know the Cubs, we know the Reds won't be. We know the Pirates won't be. The Cubs are tricky because I think they will do some major spending this offseason. They had a really good second half. Their pitching is ahead of schedule. They have discovered that there are a few players they can build around offensively, but now they need to really get out there and get a shortstop. They need an elite offensive player. But I think the Cubs are going to spend money, and I think the Cubs, if I had to do it now, and I have the right to change my mind, because obviously these teams have not made any moves yet. But as I sit here right now, if I had to handicap it, I would say the Cubs will emerge as the foremost competitor to the Cardinals in 23 in the division. But again, that's subject to change. Let's just see how everybody makes their moves, if they make big moves. But I'm just saying, if you all are starting to think about, who's going to be the biggest threat to the Cardinals in the Central? I think ultimately it'll be the Cubs. So we'll see how that works out. I think that would be fun. I would like that. And it might even put a little pressure on DeWitt and Mozeliak. I don't think they absolutely hated that run the Cubs went on, where they had to hear about that all the time. So it's actually it sounds weird, but it's in the Cardinals' best interest, in the fans' best interest, for the Cubs to be better, because that's the one team in the division that will get the blood roiling with DeWitt and Mozeliak. They don't want to hear all that stuff again, So
that would push them.
And to their credit, I mean, this Cubs dynasty never materialized, and so the Cardinals actually got through that okay. But they still are very sensitive about Cubs stuff, to the point of where, frankly, I think the Cardinals kind of embarrassed themselves a little, by having these special – like when the Cubs came into Busch Stadium after the year they won the World Series, the first time in, I mean, the Cardinals had the ballpark all decked out as if, they wanted to remind the Cubs of all the stuff that they had won. And it was just like, okay, everybody knows that. It's like, are you that insecure?
Mm-hmm.
If you're the king, you're the champion, act like it. Okay, they won a World Series for the first time since 1908. So stinking what? That's one. That's one in more than a century. So what? You don't have to put all these big signs everywhere to show everybody you're still the boss. But that's why it's weird. I know no one wants to root for the Cubs. I get it. But maybe you should a little bit, only you want them to get better and put some pressure on the front office and ownership. And the weird thing about that is, other than something like that, they don't have any pressure on them. They don't. And they need some. It would be healthy for them.